So this I think we talked about this off camera or I mentioned it on another take and then obviously would further expand on it. But we always talk about I guess modifying the game, altering the rules, trying to make it better for the experience. And one of the rules that came up, and I'm interested to get kind of your feedback on it, is the team shot clock versus the running clock for time. So this is a very niche thing, but it often occurs after an inbound, which a team will deliberately let the ball roll or kind of bounce to a location before the player picks it up. But the shot clock does not begin, but the running clock does. Now, from a referee's perspective, the shot clock begins when a team gains possession. Now, from a team control perspective, the inbounding team is in control of the ball and they're passing it in. And the shot clock would naturally, or at least should naturally begin. If it caused a turnover, then the shot clock would reset to the other team. But I see no reason why they can't synchronize that up because there are rare moments, and it's probably one of those rules that, it changes and no one's too outraged about it. But there are a couple of moments that they stall a couple of seconds, they drag out a couple of seconds that aren't necessary. Trying to milk that 2-for-1 situation, or sometimes just comically doing it. So, what are your thoughts on the team shot clock versus total clock?
I'm going to assume you looked into this a bit more than me. But so just to be clear here, the rule is that because I've seen, so I guess one of the classic culprits of this is Ja Morant, I think at the moment, right? There's a lot of clips going around with that. The ball was inbounded, obviously at the other end of the floor, and it sort of rolled slowly to half court, give or take. I think actually one of his biggest ones, like they took probably about 20 seconds off the game clock, but the shot clock didn't tick down until he picked up the ball. So we're basically saying the ruling here is basically that, to be clear, that when the ball comes into play, the game clock starts to run. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when the ball is touched by a player on court, then the shot clock begins. But when the ball is inbounded, the game clock is already running. So they don't synchronize up.
So when does the actually game clock start? When the player inbounds the ball and
This,
leaves his hands?
the I would actually assume the game clock begins when the referee passes the player the ball for the 5 second count that they have to inbound it.
But the game clock's not running on that 5 second count for the referee.
The game count would figuratively. Oh, so I think I'm sorry, I've got myself mistaken. Off a made basket, when the player grabs it, the clock's automatically running because of a made basket. But on a dead ball situation where they inbound it, it would, excuse me, indigestion, it would be once the player inbounds the ball. So
Okay.
it's a
Yep.
very niche
Yep.
case that you get this time wasting thing,
So
but it just feels like an odd rule that hasn't been rectified, considering that, as I said, with a shot clock perspective, it is the team controlling the ball, and that is the team inbounding the ball. That is them figuratively in control of that. So it is a
I just
curious decision why they don't see.
I just realized where I clicked here. So obviously, in a sideline situation or out of bounds situation off a timeout, the clock doesn't start until obviously the ball is touched in play. And at the same time, the obviously game clock would start and the shot clock would start. But obviously, in a running clock situation off a made basket, is that the situation where the
No,
running
no, no.
game
This
clock
can
is running?
occur. This can occur from a dead ball situation. So after a timeout, a player can roll the ball in,
But how does that even make
and
sense? Because if no one's touched the ball, then the game actually hasn't even
precise.
started.
No, so they're what they're doing is they're crediting the fact that when the ball becomes live on the court, so just imagine that once it passes an imaginary line, it's now live. They're factoring that as a running clock.
I'm actually confused here, mate. Like, because you've just brought this up and I haven't looked into it. But my first thought here is that this doesn't make sense because if let's say there's 2 seconds left and you're trying to make a game-winning play, you've called a timeout, you've got a sideline inbounds, you're going to toss the ball in, and as the ball is traveling through the air, you're talking about some imaginary line that you just mentioned. All right, you're saying now that you start the clock because it's past some imaginary line once it's entered the floor.
That that would fall within the parameters, I believe, of the last 2 minutes, right? So there's slightly different clock regulations there. So, for example, after a made basket in the last 2 minutes, the clock does stop, but for the remainder of the game, it actually doesn't. So there's a lot of like, that's probably another point as well. Like these clock rules that are done, there's a lot of time wasted. So you know how sometimes referees will give warnings for delay of game.
Mm.
That is done because they want to keep a running clock down after a basket. When a player taps it away, it obviously delays the other team from getting the ball to inbound. So then they stop the clock on that warning of a delay of game. But in this situation, what happens is a player can milk the clock without their team being penalized on the shot clock. And I guess my whole point is that really should just sync up, because when a player inbounds the ball, they are in control of that ball. If like, and from a stat wise, if they pass the ball in, let it roll, the shot clock never begins, and the other team steals it, that is considered a turnover for that player.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe there's been a rule change at some point, but on every basket in the NBA game, doesn't the clock stop?
No, no. I'm 95% confident that up until the last 2 minutes of any quarter, I believe it is a running clock. So when, you could watch some highlights, they'll shoot, they'll score, and then the other team will take it out and inbound it, and the clock should still be running.
Okay. Well, I feel like we spent like 4 minutes now trying to clarify the ruling here, whereas your question is, what's the thought here of this actual play? And I guess, look, I've seen the clips too, and my first thought here as a defender is that if you've got a problem with Ja Morant wasting 20 seconds off the clock rolling the ball up the floor, go up and play D on him. Feels like a simple solution.
I feel like every time I've got like, I think, look, one of the things that happens is rules exist obviously to promote specific behavior, right? So this rule would promote non-time wasting behavior, and your thing is counter it by just going up and playing D and then forcing the pickup and the progression of the game. It's a valid point, but then you could make a case and say, well, then why do we need a shot clock? Like, just go and play D. So I think there are certain rules in there that are designed to keep the game flowing, and that's probably one of the few rules that's a holdover of, you know, not keeping the game flowing, not allowing the team, I guess, to be punished for holding the ball figuratively for over a minute, in some cases.
It's just a sort of a niche in strategy here that, unless there's a rule change made, which there might be, in the near future, that players and teams are exploiting or utilizing to their advantage. And I guess you think about any sport, you think about the rules, you consider how you can maximize it to your advantage to get the result you want, to win a game, to whatever the scenario is, to get an extra shot or whatnot. All right, to run a bit more clock of the time off the clock, because you're already up, and the less time the other team has to come back, the better for you. It's a strategy. And yeah, look, I guess from my perspective, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with the rule. I don't think it necessarily needs to change. I think if the other opposing team has an issue with the rule, there's a simple solution there to just get in the player's face and force them to pick up the ball or effectively get a steal. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's sometimes, we make all these rule changes to improve the game, but you're never going to create a perfect game.
I think this rule specifically would never really be done in the last dying minutes of a game. So if it's a fourth quarter and there's a close game, you're not really going to see teams allow the other team to roll the ball up like that. But it's done, and the Ja Morant clip's the one that comes to mind. But that was done, I believe, in like the third quarter, right? And so the true motive of it is, is it that logic of, hey, like, come play D on me / give me a free break, I'll just stand here and hold the ball. It doesn't happen enough for it to be a significant issue. But considering it's a relatively simple rule of the shot clock will run once your team inbounds the ball, it feels like a very like no-brainer, right? And even in the front court, when a team inbounds the ball, naturally they're not going to be able to roll it. So it's really only a backcourt issue. And, it's clearly not promoting people to play full court defense. So it feels like a very old it's just a holdover. It's a holdover of something that, might save a collaborative time of 2 minutes in the whole NBA season, but it just feels like a rule that probably doesn't need to exist anymore. Doesn't really give a benefit.
So you would advocate for the rule change to say that both times should be synchronized.
Second you inbound the ball, shot clock should start synchronizing. Your team has inbounded the ball. You had control of it. You've put it into live play according to the game clock. Makes no sense why it's not part of your possession.
Yo, this is Two Guys with Spare Time. I'm Faz, this is Nick. You're probably a basketball fan like us, so hopefully you can throw us an assist and giving our video a like and subscribing to our channel.
And if you got thoughts, feelings, or even some suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And thank you for using your spare time to watch us in our spare time.